The House of Mystery presents Inside Writing, the radio show where authors discuss their writing process in all genres.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I'm Al Warren, and Mr. David Rose Martino.
Back to the Rose, huh?
Yeah, you're back to the Rose, because I can't.
Back to the Rose?
Yeah, it's kind of, I'm still mad. But
you're mad?
But I don't get, remember, I get even. Just, you know.
What did I do?
Well, I get COVID, and you're making fun of me.
I wasn't making fun of you.
You were.
I laugh all the time.
Yeah, I know, but you're not supposed to.
I'm not laughing at you.
Yeah, well, yeah.
I'm laughing with you, Al.
Who's laughing? You know,
who's
it's like
laughing now?
You tell someone, yeah, please don't start singing. You're not gonna, don't quit the day job.
Yeah, I know, right?
You know, it's not gonna happen. You know, no. Well, you could be Brittany.
Yeah.
Why don't you join the New Kids on the Block?
That'd be cool.
Hey, I hear the Monkees has some openings.
Oh, that's terrible.
Oh, is that too soon? I guess it is.
A little too soon.
Yeah. Oh well. I'll be good. You know, I'll behave myself. Mainly, for the most part. Hey, you see those guys that were in that fishing contest and they got caught cheating?
Oh, I did actually. I saw that. Yeah,
they stuffed the fish full of weights or something. What people won't do, you know. First of all, you got the chess champion up against someone's like an anal beads vibrating, and then to cheat, you know, getting signals from someone so he could cheat, and then you get the fish ones. I mean. Just, you know, I don't want to be a champion unless I'm really a champion.
Champion, right?
Right?
Is there a lot of money in the fish tournaments? There must be.
I don't know. I passed it on to member Weeks, Mark Weeks.
Oh,
he was on it. And remember, because he's a big fisher and he's into all that. And he said it goes on a lot. But I didn't ask him. But I don't think there's big money in it. Even the chess thing, you know, it's not like you're making tons of money. I mean, at the end, I guess you probably make pretty good check, but even then.
Well, I read with the fish that they were way over the weight that would be natural. So you'd think that if you're a fisherman or whatever you want to call fisher person today, that you would know what a fish weighed.
Well, you would think you'd be a little bit more careful, I would think. But I mean, hey, who am I? You know, I'm the guy that goes out fishing with people, and I'm reading my Star magazine while they're fishing
exactly.
In the boat. You know, I want to see what gossip's going on.
Weekly World News.
Yeah, that's it. Because I'm in there all the time. Space alien baby, bat head,
with the bat boy.
Yeah. Well, that's a different story. That's a different magazine. But anyway, well, speaking of bat boys, we've got a Canadian writer that I got here. You know, this is pretty amazing that someone from Canada can write. But, so he's got 3 books out, and I believe they're all part of a series. This is great, and it's called The Hammerhead. Now that, you know, I have to read a book like that. Hammerhead, Jed Mysteries. So that's, you know, in the new book, 5 Moves of Doom. Sounds like someone I know. So Mr. A.J. Devlin, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Well, so AJ, what does that stand for, AJ? All juiced up?
Yeah. Not quite. Alexander Jeremy.
How did you get into writing, or what makes you go to something like writing and thinking you can make a career out of it?
Good question. I would say, well, I did try to follow my dad's footsteps as an athlete, as a basketball player, and I just didn't have the stuff. So I was really into, the other thing I was really into other than athletics growing up was entertainment, books, films. And so when I wasn't, you know, in the gym, I was at the movie theaters, or I had my nose, you know, deep into, you know, usually crime fiction. And then both my parents were educators. So when I hung up the sneakers after freshman year, and I realized I just didn't have the chops, they both strongly encouraged me to get a degree in something that I loved, and the only thing I loved was creative writing, and some filmmaking that I had done in high school, and that sort of led me to film school in Southern California, and then that led me to my professor and mentor, Leonard Schrader, and then that led me to working, trying to get established in screenwriting, and then finally taking a stab at crime fiction for try something different, but similar.
But when you go to school, university, and getting into creative writing on an educated level, does that change you? Like, how does that change you is what I should say in the books you write. Like, I think what I'm trying to get at is now that you've been to college and you have that in your belt, so to speak, if you would have wrote one of these books before that as compared to after that education, how do you think it's different? What's different about you?
Oh, I don't think I could have written them before. I mean, certainly the toolkit, and learning how to structure a story was pretty essential for me. I always was drawn to sort of lean, mean cinematic storytelling, whether it be film or crime fiction, and that's probably why I gravitated toward crime fiction. It's just I just love fast-paced stories and page turners. But yeah, I spent my time. I was in LA total about 7 years, and I spent my time down there trying to write what would sell. And so I was trying to come up with the new, Saw, or the new American Pie, or the new, action movie, or whatever was hot and whatever was selling. So I was always trying to fit a category, and I never really wrote something that was really something I truly wanted to write. And it wasn't until I moved home and I was sort of reassessing, and then I met my wife, and we got married, and then we had children. And then I remember my professor always saying, take a break one day and take a crack at a mystery novel. And because structurally they're very similar. And I was nervous and hesitant, but I started to. And then I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I want to write a series character. And if I want to write a series character, what would it be? And so I kind of circled around, and I'd read about a lot of athlete detectives, and then I kind of put that with my childhood love of professional wrestling, and that's what my series is about a pro wrestler, PI. But he's about 35 in the books. He's used to be a big star in the wrestling world, and then he walked away right as his career was taking off. And there's some stuff there in his past that is addressed and explored in the novels, and there was just a bit of, I was able to go somewhere a little bit deeper, but without sacrificing pacing, I hope, in the series, and so that's something I don't think I could have written in my 20s for sure, and it wasn't until I sort of got more settled in life, and then I think in terms of changing me, becoming a parent, and then watching my kids grow up, and just changing my perspective on the importance of family, and then sort of channeling that into the book. I think there's a lot more heart there, I suppose I would say, that maybe might not have been there when I was younger.
What was it like for you to transition from screenwriting to the prose novel? Did you find that was an easy transition, or did you find it was more difficult? It
was fun and exciting, and in some ways easy. In other ways, it was difficult. The easier parts I found were dialogue. I always loved dialogue, and so screenplays to snappy dialogue in crime fiction, that worked for me. I loved getting to spend more time with my characters, particularly my lead character, because in a screenplay you're spending 110, 120 pages with them, and it's pretty lean and Spartan storytelling. Whereas and I tell my books from first person, so getting to literally go into their head and write as them narrating, that was a real treat. I think probably the hardest thing for me was the setting. And so when I wrote, so I had my story for my first book, Cobra Clutch, and I had it outlined, and I started writing it, and I had my plot points and my inciting incidents and my midpoint twists and my low moments, and I had it all, everything I had learned and studied, and I had it all, structured out, and I was very happy with it. And then I was extremely fortunate that a fellow protege of my professor, Len, her name was Teresa Schwegel, and she actually won the Edgar Award for Best First Novel for Officer Down years ago. And because we had a shared mentor, I reached out to her and I just said, hey, I said, Len had told me to take a crack at a mystery novel, and I was just wondering if you had any advice. And she's like, she was so generous, and she offered to read it. And she came back and she gave me some feedback. It was probably the best feedback I ever got. And I think had I not gotten, I wouldn't have been able to make that transition. And she said, it feels like your story. She's like, I like your characters. I like the humor. I like the action. I like the pacing. She's like, all this is working for me. Feels like your story could take place in any city in North America. You need to make it feel like it can only take place in Vancouver. And Vancouver was where I had set it, and it was where I wanted to write it. I wanted to showcase my hometown, and I was only really comfortable writing a novel in a city in which I lived. So it was either going to be Vancouver or it was going to be Los Angeles. And, you know, many have done that much better, you know, in my opinion. And I thought, you know, there was more opportunity and it was a better fit for me to sort of set it in Vancouver. And so that's what I did. So I basically went back and wrote the city of Vancouver as more of a character in the story. And then when that dovetailed with the history of professional wrestling, and particularly Western Canadian professional wrestling, then everything started coming together.
I was going to ask if you did a city, if you wrote it like a character, but you kind of said that. So when you write a series like this, is this kind of all mapped out in your brain? Do you kind of know where you're going in all three books at the beginning? Do you kind of have this master plan, master outline, and you just kind of go through the details as it goes? Or is this something that happens after each book is done?
I'd say both. Earlier on, I definitely had a clear, pretty structured, pretty outlined, idea of what I wanted the first book to be in terms of, there's so much, establishing that's going on. You're establishing this, PI and what makes him a little different, and his home base and his allies. And so you're kind of creating this sandbox. And then, and then you finish your story and you take down the sandcastles and then you build new ones. But yeah, like the genesis and the idea for the series was always that as a ex-pro wrestler turned private investigator in Vancouver, he was sort of uniquely suited for catching cases that maybe investigate fringe sports and unusual subcultures. And so the first book is sort of him confronting his past a bit and going back into the world of independent local wrestling. The second book, he catches a case which takes him in the world of women's flat track roller derby. And then the third book is into local underground sort of mixed martial arts. But like the third book originally I had as an idea, but I think I had it in my mind for like book 4, book 5. But as I sort of went through, I was like, the more I've sort of spent time with the series and the character, the more it's taken shape, and then I've sort of been acting and reacting more instinctively. And I'm like, this feels too soon for this. This feels like I should bump this idea up. And so there's a lot more flexibility and moving things around as opposed to when I got my start, when I was pretty, laser focused on how I was going to establish the character.
Well, I want to ask this as a lifelong martial artist. I noticed you mentioned your lifelong love for pro wrestling. You mentioned roller derby, MMA fighting. There's, I believe, there's yoga in your book as well. Do you? I guess. Are you drawing from any experience? Did you go do any of this, or is this mostly research or imagination? How did you tackle that area?
Research. There was definitely some research, but there was a lot of experience too. Growing up, my dad he would put me in wrestling camps at Simon Fraser University out here in Greater Vancouver every summer, and they were great, and so they were fun. And you learn like the fundamentals of like single and double leg takedowns and whatnot, and holds and stuff. So it gave me an appreciation of freestyle wrestling. And then some of my favorite wrestlers are the guys that are, technically sound, that, really are, like, whether it be the the showcase of professional wrestling are outside the ring. You know, you look at like the Brock Lesnar's or the Kurt Angles or you know, guys like Bret, you know, Hitman Hart and Stu Hart in the dungeon and all those famous stories, these technical wrestlers. That helped me a lot. So that experience combined with the research definitely helped. And then roller derby was not something I had heard of. I did not know much about it, and I was very fortunate I was able to get out to some matches. So that I did games. I was able to get out to those pre-COVID and really check them out. And man, I thought professional wrestlers had wild names, and then you get to women's roller derby, and it is unbelievable, and it's just so badass and counterculture and it's just so supercharged and tough and gritty and fun and there's just so much flair to it and so I just loved it, and I was like, oh, you know, this is going to be fun to explore. And then with Five Moves of Doom, I had done, in addition to you know, freestyle wrestling, I done a little judo you know, in my youth, and then some aikido in college. My experience was very grappling based, self-defense, not much striking on my end. So that's where I really threw in my research, especially when I'm choreographing and writing fight scenes. I wanted to make my protagonist a more effective striker. But at his core, he's a grappler, and that his identity as a fighter and him sort of reconciling that is kind of one of the character arcs of the third book.
Your characters. What's your own personal experience with your characters? Are you someone that sees them, hears them, feels them, and all that sort of stuff? Or are you someone that is totally separate can just write from a plot point of view?
They definitely, for me, have become sort of a part of me, and in many ways, the more I write them, the more familiar, the easier a lot of writing them is. So I seem to be going more on instinct now at this point. A lot of the times with the characters, just knowing them so well, and then there's just these whole backstories and, you know, quirks and just, you know, personality traits that I maybe necessarily haven't had a chance to share yet. But in my mind, they're much more fully formed, and you know, and I like to think they're pretty fully formed in the books, but there's just a depth there. So I feel very connected. You know, to my characters, but also there's a certain degree of wish fulfillment there too as well. You know, I grew up in you know, the 80s and the 90s, right? So I loved movies like Back to the Future and Die Hard and The Last Boy Scout. So for me, it was just all about pure escapist entertainment, and that's when I finally said I'm going to write something for me. That's what I gravitated toward, and that's what I try to channel in the series. So I mean, Hammerhead Jed, he's definitely more of an emboldened version of sort of who I wish to be, or wish I could be, or wish I could have been growing up. And then he's got other characters in his life, including his Irish cousin, who's sort of his de facto sidekick, who's, that guy's almost like pure id. He's just a wild man. And, so he's a, you know, what would I do, you know, if I were a little more bold as maybe my protagonist, and what would I do if I just didn't give a flying hoot about anything, might be the sidekick character. So it's fun to sort of explore and wonder and just sort of see where that takes you. It's certainly an enjoyable process.
Well, Hammerhead Jed, can you tell us how your character got his nickname, or is that something that we want to wait for in the story? No, absolutely. I'm pretty clear about that right out the gate. He got that nickname because he would walk to the ring with a 2x4 piece of wood of Western red cedar, and then he would get in the ring and have his match. And he was an not old school, but he was a hostile wrestler, kind of like Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Rock, Triple H, those kind of guys that I watched. And that was sort of his style. And then, if he would win a match, part of his celebration thing, you know, Steve Austin would drink beers, knock his 2x4 over his head, break it in half. So real high level stuff here. But you know, it was a gimmick, right? And that's what I love so much about wrestling are the gimmicks. But then, what I realized very quickly, especially when I got into my 20s, I started, realizing that the more interesting stories for me in professional wrestling were outside the ring.
and behind the scenes. And so then that's when it really took shape for me, that you're going to have this, balance between sort of the in-ring over, theatrical, over the top stuff, and then the out-ring darker stuff. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that he was certainly inspired by a guy like Hacksaw Jim Duggan, who would come to the ring, usually with a 2x4 as well. And he'd have a American flag around his neck, and he'd give the big "oh" and thumbs up. And so he was a little uber patriotic, which is not really where I wanted to go. But I wanted to give him sort of that gritty, sort of Western Canadian, Stu Hart dungeon vibe. Those guys that just, were grinders that, that really earned their stripes and really deserved to be there. And it's a tough life, right? And so, and then it's also kind of a little wordplay that Hammerhead, that he's hard-headed, and that, he catches a case and he tends not to let them go.
So you're really trying to say that you want to be a big wrestler?
Not anymore. Maybe once upon a time. I was into that for sure. And I enjoyed weightlifting and stuff, and, all those football and all those sports. But no, it was, again, wish fulfillment and, escapism. But nobody, to the best of my knowledge, I hadn't really read a lot, especially when I made the decision to try to write crime fiction. I really zeroed in on sort of the subgenre of athlete detectives. So I read books about boxer detectives, sports agent sleuths, surfer PIs, and I enjoyed them all. And I learned things about surfing I didn't know, or behind the scenes, wheeling and dealing in the sports agent world, and I just enjoyed the little twist, or the little fresh take on your gumshoe, and so I was like, well, I love pro wrestling. Nobody's, I think, is, to the best of my knowledge, has really created a pro wrestler detective before, and I saw it as a chance to write mystery comedies, to have a certain degree of humor in the series, which was very exciting for me. And I think, to be honest, to do professional wrestling justice, you can't just be gritty. You need to embrace sort of the fun and the panache of the whole business, but while also not shying away from, watch the Ric Flair 30 for 30 documentary, and you'll know what I mean. There's, it can be a tough life. So.
Gold dust. Well, listen. So when you're putting in comedy, and that's something I tend to do, and it can be satire, sarcastic. Some people can even call me names, obnoxious and stuff. But do you have to be careful on where and what you make fun of and how you do it?
I think it's always good to be aware. I think one of the for me, one of the essential fundamental parts about escapist entertainment is that you're wanting to bring people into your story. You're wanting to offer a degree of whimsy and escapism to take people's minds off their problems. I think you look at something like Ted Lasso, and sort of when it came along for us collectively in pop culture, it was something that we needed and that people gravitated towards because it was just so refreshing and positive. And so I don't want to take any cheap shots. So my protagonist is definitely, Hammerhead Jed is definitely, pretty moral, ethical guy. He cares, and he's sensitive, and he doesn't, he shies away from, it's not in him to be kind of cruel or mean, but he does have a bit of a mouth on him, and he won't hesitate or shy away from wisecracking, especially with some, punks or with some, roughnecks that he might encounter along the way. But then there's also some supporting characters in the series that are a little more rough around the edges. Let's just put it that way. And but again, it's that thing of like, I don't want to, write a character that people find like offensive, but by the same token, I can't forget what this guy at Beer League Hockey said a couple weeks ago, because it was a little outrageous or whatever. And it's just, and so I want to capture sort of like that authenticity of like, this is how some people talk. And it's just, if you're going to get into this world of private investigation. You're going to be helping out people, and then you're going into these sometimes shady subcultures. It felt like it was necessary in order for it to be authentic, to sort of to sort of try and capture that, or at least represent that to a certain degree. But yeah, I definitely don't want it to I'm cautious and guarded with my humor, but I like to have fun with it as well.
Well, since you include a good deal of humor in your novels, just like stand-up comedians, it's said that there needs to be, I guess, like a sense of comedic timing. Do you feel there's a need for a flow or timing to, I guess, bring about the humor within a prose novel?
Yeah, I mean, I know at this point I've tried really hard to make it sort of signature part of the series, and I think one of the more challenging things with the latest book taking place and against the backdrop of street level mixed martial arts, it's definitely really gritty fisticuffs world in which he has to go into. And then I wanted to explore that here's this guy he's a wrestler detective, he's sort of a big tough guy, he's used to getting by on his physicality and he's defined by it. And then I wanted to sort of strip that away from him a bit, and what if his usual advantages are no longer there. So that was a little trickier in terms of trying to finding places to maintain that humor without shortchanging this sort of character arc and this bit of self-reflection I wanted the character to go through. For me, I kind of find that I just sort of read the story and I just kind of get a feel and a vibe too, like, okay, I'm getting things are getting a little intense here, and might be time to lighten the mood, but whereas in the roller derby book, Rolling Thunder, which was book 2 in the series, that's the most colorful and sort of zany of the three, and that I sort of had the opposite problem where I was almost getting a little too farcical, and I had to dial it back and remember, okay, well, this is a mystery at its core. I can't just turn this into an SNL sketch, and so it's always sort of a balancing act, but I really enjoy it. And then I think it can brighten the story, and I think it can, when done right, it balances the story. And I think for me, it's the kind of stuff that I just love. Like, I mean, John McClane's probably my favorite character of all time because, he's dealing with all this stuff and, building with terrorists, and this just perverse sense of humor comes out as a coping mechanism. And that was just, that for me is like the gold standard. And so that's fun to try and emulate.
Well, yeah, that's just like me. I even look like him.
There you go.
Right. Yeah, in 20 years from now. Wow. So does this lead you into thinking about PC correctness in writing and that sort of sensitivity sort of writing and stuff? I know a lot of publishers are starting to have sensitivity readings and stuff like that where they review things beforehand. Are you... because, let's get serious. When you get into the wrestling and boxing and all those different worlds, it tends to be a little bit more raw, right? It tends to be a little bit more name-calling and stuff like that. It's not so, let's say, PC, as they say. So are you consciously aware of it? Do you even think about it, or you just go ahead with it and it is what it is?
I'm definitely aware of it, but I don't want to do it a disservice either. And so being super stringent, politically correct might not necessarily fit or be an accurate representation of these, subcultures that I'm taking my character into. But by the same token, like myself, he doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. He doesn't want to be offensive. He doesn't want to be rude or callous, but he's trying to do his job. And but my publisher is incredible because they're really on top of all this stuff, and so I kind of have my own comfortability scale, and like, okay, but like there's a supporting character in two of the three books, and he's a rival private investigator, real sleazy guy, named Melvin, and he's just I mean, he works he has an office which used to be a Gothic art studio and he took it over for his PI office, and he's a disbarred criminal defense attorney. And he never took down the murals of, lady vampires and girls in bikinis on, with space guns on craters on the moon and stuff. And he sort of incorporates that as part of his business image. And then he's right next to a famous Vancouver gentleman's club called the Number 5 Orange. And he's often over there having his dinner. And so Hammerhead Jed will have to go over there if he needs a favor or whatever. So there's no sugarcoating of it. And he can be a little bit of a prickly character. But my detective is often just sort of annoyed by him or irritated by him, or he finds him. I think one line in the first book is like, spending this much time with Melvin made me feel like I was in a Porky's movie. And so that's something that, I definitely I don't want to shy away from it, but I don't want it to be gratuitous, and I don't want it to be unnecessary. I want it to serve a purpose. But those, you get into those worlds, like there are people that are like that. And so I want it to ring true. The thing I found most amusing was because I'd written Cobra Clutch, and at the time I was around the same age as, Hammerhead Jed, and he was sort of his mid-30s, and I was writing the sequel. And, the first all three books take place during his first year as a private investigator. So he's aging slower than I am. And in the second book, he kind of starts ragging on millennials. And, it's just sort of like this running gag. And my production marketing coordinator says, "You realize that Hammerhead Jed himself is a millennial, right?" And I said, "Is he? Because I'm on the cusp and I'm technically not." So I was just, taking pot shots. And she's like, "Yeah." And then my general manager was like, "Well, I'll just make him one of those guys that just kind of hates his own kind." And so that's why he's aware that he's a millennial, but he doesn't have to like it. And I was like, okay, so I made that change. So little stuff like that. But that's where, I try and be as free. I try to be as free and as unencumbered as possible when I write the story, and then that's where the editing comes in. And I've just been blessed to work with such a great team at New West Press, and they always make sure that things are addressed. And if something I miss, I try to catch as much as possible. But if something maybe goes too far, or something doesn't go far enough, they'll encourage me, and it's a pretty wonderful working relationship there.
I remember watching roller derby as a kid. That's how old I am. It was exciting. That was the 70s. That was a lot of fun.
It used to come on after wrestling on Saturday afternoons.
Yeah. Well, I watched Bugs Bunny, and then I went into roller derby.
That's a good day of programming.
What else is there? Batman at night,
There's a show called Rock and Rollerblade, I think, or Rock and Roller Derby or something like that back in the 80s.
Oh.
Very short time, very obscure.
Yeah, there was Rollerball or whatever, that James Caan.
Yeah, the James Caan movie is pretty famous.
Yeah, that was all sort of. I wasn't allowed to watch that because I was too young and it was too violent, right? So.
Well, it sort of loses the essence of what roller derby is, I think, or women's flat track roller derby, which is what's explored in the second book, is because there's so much female empowerment that's associated with that sport. And I mean, the names they call themselves, and that's like, such a big part of it. There's a character in Rolling Thunder who's one of my favorites, and her roller derby name is Pippi Longstomping, because she wails on the other girls, and she skates around with her hair and pigtails or red hair or whatever. And there's another character named Amazombie who's paints her face up like she's the undead, and she's about 6'2" on roller skates. And I wish I could say I made these names up, but I did not. I just, I Googled, and I just went through hundreds and hundreds of roller derby names, and there's so much wordplay, and there's so much fun. And I used to think wrestling names were the pinnacle and the best. But roller derby, I have to give the nod to roller derby in terms of having the most creative and fun original names.
It's funny. I guess it probably is more about woman empowerment than I realized, because when I was just a little kid in the 70s, for me, when we watched it, I just couldn't wait till the woman beat up people. Right. That's all. You couldn't wait till someone whipped someone or did something really wild and there was a fight. I hate to say it, but that's sort of what you're thinking of as a 10-year-old kid, and you're watching it, right? You're thinking, yeah,
for sure.
And you get your favorite, and it's like, you hope that they beat up the other one. It's terrible. No wonder I'm sick. No wonder I'm the way I am. Now, does each book stand on its own? Like you can pick up like, the Cobra Clutch, for instance, and read it in entirety, and you're not lost because you don't have the other two.
Absolutely. I mean, Cobra Clutch is the debut. Myself as a fan of crime fiction, mystery novels, I love to read books in order. But mine are specifically, I write them in a very specific way that you don't have to. Especially, with the gimmick, if you will, themselves of, the first book's independent wrestling, the second book's roller derby, the third book's, street level mixed martial arts. There might be somebody that sparks to a certain sport or subculture that, that's the one they want to start with. And then maybe they, find the character enjoyable. Maybe they return and pick up the other one. So they absolutely can be read out of order. But they also, there are sort of Easter eggs and a bit more, bit connective tissue, a little bit of connective tissue that you might miss, if you read them out of order, but, teach their own. I'm just trying to provide, fun, fast-paced, escapist entertainment and, with a little, bit of an athletic themed twist.
Is there kind of a subtext? Is there something you want people to get out of it other than the entertainment value?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, definitely, because, not to sound like I'm beating a drum, but the reason that, Die Hard resonate with me so strongly is because it's not just about a dude blowing away terrorists and, killing bad guys. Like people ask me, what's your favorite movie or favorite moment in Die Hard? And, it's like when he walks across the glass, right? It's like when he shoots the guys in the knees. I'm like, no, it's when he's in the bathroom and he's pulling the glass out of his feet and he's talking on the CB radio to the cop on the outside. And he's like, I need you to give a message to my wife. And he's like, yeah, I know. Tell her you love her. And he's like, no, he's like, she's heard me say I love you 1,000 times. Tell her I'm sorry. Say John says he's sorry. And I remember that moment so vividly because it was like, here's this guy who's going through all this like superhuman level action hero stuff. But, it was such a grounding, real moment and it was a heartfelt moment. And it just gave that character this depth. And it allowed me as a viewer to invest in him deeper than I had in, maybe like, a Stallone or a Schwarzenegger movie that came out a few years before. And that's, I think, essentially why John McClane, in a lot of ways, sort of redefined the role of the action hero. And so I tried to, again, emulate that with my work. I wanted to make Hammerhead Jed, I wanted there to be an everyman quality to him. I wanted him to be relatable. I wanted him to be a guy that you could hang out with. I wanted him to be a guy that genuinely cared. And then he cares about the people in his life and the people he works with. And he cares about his clients. In the first book, his former tag team partner, he hasn't seen him in years, and he still wrestles locally with a pet snake. And the kickoff of the story is the snake's kidnapped and held for ransom. And he files a police report, but nobody's really taking it seriously. And he goes to Hammerhead Jed, who knows how much this guy loves his snake. He loves it more than he loves most people. And his heart breaks for the guy, and he reluctantly agrees. Like, okay, I'll take a look. I'll see what I can do. His dad is a retired police officer, Vancouver police officer, turned PI, and so he has some resources, and so he starts looking into snake napping gone awry. so he has. I definitely try to provide him with a big having a big heart, and I hope that readers find that relatable or enjoyable, and it makes him a sympathetic lead.
It's awful what happened to Bruce Willis in the last while with his brain and all those bad movies they were putting him in. Mm-hmm. That's just terrible.
It is very sad.
Yeah. I won't even watch a lot of them now. They're always on the streaming services, but it's just why even bother?
Yeah. It was pretty. It was pretty shocking. It was pretty shocking too because I was unfamiliar with the condition, so I was very, very sorry to hear that. But he just had a charisma about him, and not just as in Die Hard, but like The Last Boy Scout, and for me that's the pinnacle of Shane Black movies, and he's just so good and so funny, and you just can't take your eyes off him, and he's such a curmudgeon, but he's just so lovable. And so that's the real trick, I think is creating a character that's sort of, complex and nuanced, and he's got his own issues and his own things going on, but there's some degree of relatability there. There's something that hopefully gets the reader or the audience to invest in this guy, maybe this person a bit more than they might, usually, because I know that's exactly the kind of stuff I gravitated toward.
Well, but, as the writer, a lot of you is going into that character of yours, your Hammerhead. And that, sure. So you must kind of, in a sense, a lot of things that he goes through from his point of view and his feelings and his reactions are kind of yours in a sense, and some of your own vulnerability. So that kind of is a little bit exposing in a sense. Does that sort of do you ever think about that or worry about that or worry about people seeing you in the character?
I don't worry about it. I definitely do it. I think people that know me in my personal life might read and see things in the character more than someone who just picks up the book. But yeah, I feel like I can't do my best work if I'm not channeling, like you said, myself into, these characters. I mean, all the characters, but especially him. He's the anchor point. He's the focal point of the series. And that's definitely, by design. And I don't plan on stopping that at all. But that's, it's also very cathartic for me to explore these things that are on my mind or things that I'm feeling or whatever, and sort of channel it into this character, and then hopefully do it in a way that doesn't slow down the pacing and doesn't hinder action and entertainment and twists and turns and all the boxes you want to check for some fun crime fiction.
So your secondary characters, let's talk about those. So where do they come from? I know they're from people you know and people you've worked with or been with and stuff like that. So let's start naming names and telling us why they're there and what is it that you, like, I remember talking to A.J. Horn, and I remember him saying that anybody who's rude to him or butts him in a line or does something, he takes that character and kills them in the books and does something bad to them. So what's your use of secondary characters?
Well, sometimes it's just sort of packaging them or trying to find that little quirk or that little element that makes them, a little bit different. There's a character in Rolling Thunder, book 2, and then in Five Moves of Doom, book 3, who has apparently starting to become a bit popular. His name's Sykes, and he's a bookmaker. But I tried to make him a little different, and he's sort of an upscale gentleman, and he has sort of a peculiar quirks in that he has these sort of side business ventures that he's very vested in. They usually revolve around animals. And so in the first one, in Rolling Thunder, he's training a championship dachshund wiener dog for the annual Hastings Racecourse wiener dog races, which is a real thing in Vancouver in the spring. And there's actually some serious prize money. And then he returns in Five Moves of Doom, and he's now got into goat yoga, which, if you're not familiar, people actually pay money to do yoga with goats. It's supposed to enhance the serenity of the experience. But I watched a few videos of it on YouTube, and there's a lot of pooping that goes on sometimes when the goats are on the back of the you're in the downward dog and you're getting pooped on. So I don't really see how that's a Zen experience, but at least their own. But it was fun to just do something kind of, sports themed and quirky, but then combine it with this guy that was sort of upscale and elegant. And that was based on a basketball coach I had met when I had gone on a basketball trip to Belgium, I think in high school. And he was a Belgian basketball coach, and he's just a very refined gentleman, and he had us into his house, and he had a beautiful library, and he poured himself like a sherry or a scotch, and he sat down, he put on some classical music, and I was like, this guy's really polished, we're just there in workout gear and sweats, but he wasn't highfalutin, he wasn't talking down to us, he was just a very elegant man with, great taste and a very cultured individual, and so I do like a good old fashioned mashup, and then I guess I just find it kind of humorous that a guy that could get invested in wiener dog racing and goat yoga could be so elegant, refined. Goat yoga.
Well, listen. Speaking of the characters, as Al had asked you, have any of your characters taken on a life of their own and maybe done something to surprise you or pull the plot in a different direction, or do you feel you're just very much in control of the story?
It's a great question, and yes, not all the time, but there are definitely some significant moments where that happens, and it almost catches me off guard. And often, I guess I'm just looking at things through. I mean, primarily, I'm looking at things through Hammerhead Jed's point of view. But he has his wild man cousin sidekick can get up to some stuff, and he's a former IRA man, and so he's a lethal dude, but he's also a bit of a hot-headed piss tank, and he loves the pints of the black stuff and a good old-fashioned scrap, so sometimes he can go a little far, push the envelope. And then, but even Hammerhead Jed's dad, who's the retired police officer, now PI himself, he's got a degree of world wariness, having been on the job for so long. And there's some things that he does in the books that might be a bit surprising to some people, or not. I don't know. I suppose it depends on the reader. I know that I was very fortunate that my neighbor and friend, Joel Johnson, was a 30-year man with the Vancouver Police Department. He's also like a master martial artist and use of force expert, and he has a consulting firm, and he flies all around North America training police forces on taking down, safely and efficiently, de-escalating situations and stuff. And he's advised in all the books. He actually blurbed the most recent one, and he's just like, oh yeah, he's like, that's what I do. And I was like, okay, well, that feels good. That because it might be pushing the boundaries of what technically might be legal, even though he's no longer an officer of the law, the character of Hammerhead Jed's dad. But hearing that kind of feedback from Joel, who's also an accomplished writer in his own right, and he's written a lot of police journals and an avid fan of crime fiction, and we share authors that we're fans of, like Michael Connolly and the Harry Bosch series, and so that's a good feeling when you know that you're getting it right, and that's probably been the most rewarding thing for me with all these books, is that I've gotten to know independent wrestlers who have said you nailed it. I've gotten to know roller derby players who have emailed me and said, I really appreciate the attention to detail that you made, because like roller derby, when you're in roller derby, they don't say, well, when I'm in roller derby, they just call it derby. That's just like shorthand lingo, and it seems like a tiny little thing, but someone in that world, I think it shows that, wow, this guy, did his research, and
right.
And then I was able to get some mixed martial arts guys to consult and advise on the third one as well. So I think that's the way I see it, is if someone's going to be generous enough to come on a ride into my imagination, the least I can do is try and get the details right, and then also show respect to these, maybe fringe sports. And it might not be your cup of tea, but it doesn't mean that to the people that are in them, it's not everything to them. And I guess as a writer, or, for so long an aspiring writer, I respect and I can relate to that passion for a craft that basically, in a lot of ways, has no guarantee of ever having a payoff. You just do it because it's in your bones, and nothing's going to stop you from doing it because you love it so much.
Oh, you're not rich now? Wow. Oh, it's because you spend too much money on stuff, Calm down. Where do people find you? Where does people go out and they're looking for Mr. AJ, Mr. Alexandra Devlin, and they want to find him? Do you have like a website? Do you do social media with people? Tinder, Grindr, phone number?
I do. AJDevlin.com is my website. That's sort of my go-to hub. Although I'm most active right now on social media because I'm on a book tour promoting Five Moves of Doom. And so I'm on Twitter, Facebook page, Instagram, and now TikTok, which I don't know. I still haven't figured out TikTok, but my my marketing coordinator, she's a brilliant young lady, but she must be 30 or something. And she's like, get on there. There's entire sections of Barnes & Noble now where you walk in, it says as seen on TikTok. And I'm like, really? And so anyways, I created it. But it's all the same handle, at AJ Devlin Author. So it has that same handle across all 4 platforms. With, I don't know, who knows, maybe more to come. But
yeah. Okay, perfect. And what are you going to do next? Like, what's coming? Is there a book 4 to this series after this, or are you going to something different?
Yes, I've referred to it as a trilogy a few times, and then some people have said, "Oh, are you done? Are you done?" And trilogy doesn't mean a series is over, as far as I view it. These 3 books encapsulate and tell a bigger 3-part story of his Hammerhead Jed's first year as a private investigator. And so there's a book 4, but there's going to be a bit of a time jump. And he's in a different place, and it's fun. It's an exciting place to take him. I like to think that I leave the 3rd book with a certain degree of closure, but also with doors open for future stories. And because there is that degree of closure, it felt like a time to maybe reflect and consider maybe ideas for spin-offs or standalones or different projects or whatever.
Yeah.
Or just because I've just been so down the rabbit hole focused on getting these 3 books out as fast as possible. So yeah, but I mean, he's the most fun I've ever had. He's the best character I think I've ever written. I got lots of ideas and places I want to take him. So, he is and will remain a top priority for me for sure.
Yeah. Well, you can have him transition into a female in the next one. Next race. Or is he going to come out of the closet?
You know what? Anything's possible. Yeah, we'll have to see. As long as I get the details right, that's the thing. I always want to show respect to the people in these. If I'm going into some, sort of world or some kind of, backdrop that's not, your usual fare, I want to make sure that people in that world feel like it's being properly represented, or that I'm at least making an effort to try and get the details right, because I think people appreciate that.
Yeah. You can write from your own experience in a lot of things, and sometimes you can't. It's just, well, anyway. It's been a joy. It's been a pleasure, and here we go. I guess we're on, and we'll have everything up on our website as well. And thank you for being on the show. We've got Mr. AJ Devlin here, and he's been talking about his 5 Moves of Doom, and of course it's a Hammerhead Jed series, and it's book 3. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thanks, AJ.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Yeah. Good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.